The learning objectives of this chapter include identifying general concepts in world geography, including globalization, and major tools used by geographers to study the Earth's surface. In addition, you will be introduced to the 5 themes of the regional chapters that we will analyze for each region, and they are 1. The physical environment and environmental issues, 2. Populations and settlement patterns, 3. Cultural coherence and diversity, 4. Geopolitics, and 5. Economic and social development. Let's first begin by defining globalization. What is globalization? The text defines globalization as the increasing interconnectedness among people and places through converging economic, political, and cultural activities. It's the connection we have with others and places around the world, interacting with them through money, politics, and culture. In other words, it's like a common thread that ties us all together. Some examples of globalization would be transnational firms, or also called multinational corporations. Those are companies who have offices in more than one country. This form of globalization can best be seen in what we eat and what we wear. For example, some of the clothes we wear are made in China and Mexico. Another would be outsourcing of jobs, such as a call center in Bangalore, India. Workers in these firms in India are answering customer service calls for companies in places like the US and Europe. Globalization has had an impact on our environment. Natural resources are global commodities, and financial decisions made 1,000 miles away now affect local ecosystems and habitats, often at the Earth's expense. Globalization is contributing to the reorganization of the world. People, goods, and services are shifting around. We see evidence of this reorganization through mass migration patterns that have occurred in various places for various reasons. We see economic free trade more and more between different countries. There's been evangelism in religion over the years. There's been an increase in fast food restaurants around the world and an increase in global communications, just to name a few. Globalization is not a new concept. It has been occurring throughout history, such as the spice trade routes established hundreds of years ago. However, globalization has, through technological breakthroughs, skyrocketed in the 20th century with the innovation of the computer, internet, and as well as airplanes and the telephone. We now have large container ships that transport goods across oceans. These changes have made understanding our contemporary world both challenging and necessary. Globalization has many attributes. Many scholars believe that the major component of globalization is the economic reorganization of the world with a fully integrated, broader exchange of goods and services, and with the creation of the World Trade Organization. The World Trade Organization was formed to facilitate the exchange of goods and services between different countries and global agreements which promote free trade. Many of the attributes listed on this slide link all regions and everyone on the planet instantaneously and very efficiently. This adage comes to mind: faster, farther, and higher, and I add more. Once found only in suburban North America, shopping malls have now spread worldwide through economic globalization. This photo shows a mall in Bangkok, Thailand. Globalization also brings about cultural changes, but is this change good? Some would argue that cultural change brings about animosity and tensions between traditional cultures and more modern Western societies. Other cultural changes have been seen in social networking sites such as Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Likewise, with fast food restaurants, McDonald's, Burger King, and KFC have restaurants all over the world. Another cultural change is language. Are we headed to a universal language such as English? Lastly, globalization has a social dimension as well. The photo shows how globalization is spreading into North America, not just the other way around, as most people tend to think. This is a Thai restaurant in Las Vegas, Nevada. This blending of two cultures is called hybridization. Migration, legally and illegally, of people across international borders are changing the demographic configuration of countries at alarming rates, such as examples are in the US and Japan. Also, we have seen an increase in terrorism and crimes as we have become more global. Please pause the video and answer the following. List at least 5 specific things you see around our area that depict globalization and explain why. In your own words and using the text as a guide, be thorough and specific in your answer. Globalization is highly connected to the largest migration in human history. There are many reasons that people move. For instance, better economic opportunities, civil strife, and environmental deterioration. This photo shows a truckload of African migrants crossing the Sahara to the Mediterranean shore, where many will attempt to illegally enter Europe through Spain or Italy. Globalization has added a geopolitical dimension to the list. The United Nations was formed to promote global security and peace. It is also argued that globalization has weakened political power of individual states, and that it has strengthened the power of regional economic and political organizations such as the European Union. By doing so, we have seen an increase in separatist movements and tensions that are spreading across the globe. The terrorist act on 9/11 is an example of this globalization tension. With globalization comes environmental concerns as well. We hear a lot about global warming, an increase in water and air pollution, and deforestation. Trees in highly sensitive areas such as the tropical rainforests in Brazil are being removed at a rapid pace, causing problems for the environment. Transnational firms tend to exploit and disrupt local ecosystems that offer good resources of high value by commodifying the natural resources and building manufacturing sites in those areas. A commodity is something of value that can be bought and sold, and commodification is the process at which it occurs. As a result, the local population are often deprived of their traditional resource base and displaced into marginalized environments. Globalization is a very contentious issue around the world. Supporters believe that globalization is based on capitalistic views that will benefit everyone. Goods and services can flow freely. It enhances competition, and local economies will improve. With the increased flow of capital around the world, many advocates believe that globalization will result in a certain global economic convergence, and that the poorer countries will gradually catch up with the more advanced economies. Critics, on the other hand, believe that globalization is not a natural occurrence. There will be an overexploitation of natural resources, a greater disparity among rich and poor, and it may dissolve diversity altogether. And then there are those who support the middle ground. They believe globalization is very complex, which makes it unavoidable. We can't stop the wheels of progress, and that the promises and pitfalls can be managed. Please pause the video and answer the following. Write down your view on globalization as either a critic, advocate, or middle ground position and explain why. In your own words and using the text as a guide, be thorough and specific with your answer. So how can we keep diversity in an ever-increasing globalizing world, where it seems like everything is blending together and becoming uniform and homogeneous? Well, it's not as bleak as one might think. We can still find distinct differences between cultures in things such as language, religion, architecture, and foods. Also in economies, politics, and the physical environment. This diversity cannot be changed so easily in a short period of time. As a matter of fact, most local people work hard at maintaining their differences. Nevertheless, tensions do arise that tend to keep change at bay. The photo shows a diverse urban landscape, which is a good example of economic unevenness that comes with globalization. This was taken in New Delhi, India, where squatter settlements of the poor contrast with the high-rise office buildings and apartment houses of the more affluent in the background. There are two schools of thought emerging in regards to socio-economic terms. Thomas Friedman talks about how the world has become increasingly flat, whereas the flow of capital, goods, and services are becoming easily transported from one place to another through technological innovations. A prime example of this is the computer firms in Silicon Valley, which maintain a 24-hour work schedule by using skilled engineers halfway around the world. On the other hand, Richard Florida says we actually live in a spiky world where there is an unevenness of clear winners and losers. These peaks and valleys alternately encourage and inhibit the flow of ideas and goods around the world. Geography as a spatial science is charged with the study of the Earth's surface, and it's a term that comes from the Greek which means describing the Earth. One way to describe the Earth is through areal differentiation. Areal differentiation is examining the differences among places and explain why these differences take place. For example, why is one part of the world humid and lush, while another, just a few hundred miles away, is an arid desert? The satellite photo of oasis villages on the southern slope of Morocco's Atlas Mountains is a classic illustration of areal differentiation, or of how landscapes can differ significantly within short distances. The dark green band are irrigated date palm and vegetable fields, watered by rivers that rise in the high mountains, then flow southward into the Sahara Desert. Since irrigated fields near the rivers are precious land, the village settlements are nearby in the dry areas. Geographers are also interested in how places are connected. That connection can be explained through areal integration. Areal integration is the study of how places interact with one another. For example, the economies of Singapore and the United States are so closely intertwined, yet they are far apart physically and have other differences. These linkages have become increasingly important to globalization. Scale is important to geographers. Scale gives us a framework for which to study areal differentiation and integration. Without some sense of scale, analyzing a place would be difficult to do. We simply cannot just take each point of the Earth's surface and describe that point and do that for every point on the Earth. Geographers tend to look at places on a local, regional, and global scale and study the complicated linkages among those places. For example, a geographer would look at the ways that the village in southern India might be linked to world trade patterns, or how late arrival of the monsoon could affect agriculture and food supplies in different parts of India. Geographers lump phenomena together that are spatially similar into regions. For example, the Sahara Desert or the Amazonian rainforest. Where are the boundaries for these areas? Drawing a physical line may be possible for these areas, but what unifies them is climate and vegetation. Unifying an area with economic and cultural traits are also another way to show a region, such as the Corn Belt for parts of the central United States. Geographers designate three types of regions in this manner: a formal region, which is based on a specific physical or cultural trait. The example in the image is Santa Clara Valley in Northern California. It is an area between two mountain ranges. A functional region is defined as an area where a certain political or economic activity occurs, such as the San Jose city limits or the Corn Belt mentioned above. This is an area of dominant economic activity. And the last region is vernacular. A vernacular region is based on vague public perception, which has no real visible boundaries. For example, Silicon Valley or the Midwest. Geographers are interested in the ability of humans to modify their surroundings, and in that it is human activities that transform natural landscapes. This transformation is called cultural landscape, and often reflects the most basic human needs of food, shelter, and work. Cultural landscapes are what shape uniqueness of place and can be seen all over the globe in different ways. This is important to geographers because it tells us specific information about certain places, like if people there are rich or poor. Geographers use many tools to analyze the world. First and foremost are maps. Maps provide us with a picture of what is happening at different levels and scales and make the understanding of spatial elements easy. At the most elemental level, maps use specific points on the Earth to identify the location of a place. These points are derived by taking the longitude and latitude position on the Earth's surface, which is also known as absolute location. In today's technology arena, we use GPS or Global Positioning System to denote longitude and latitude of every place on the Earth. GPS utilizes satellite data to ping a GPS receiver, like your cell phone or other device, and it calculates the exact point of the long and lat grid to where you are located. The mapping software on your phone will then show you a dot as to where your exact location is. Geographers also use remote sensing to help them make sense of the world. Remote sensing basically refers to images taken from space at different altitudes, like from a plane or satellite in space. Geographers then use these images to analyze what is occurring on the Earth's surface. The NASA satellite image of the Dead Sea on the right, the lowest spot on Earth at 1,300 feet below sea level, uses false color remote sensing to capture different elements of the environment. Black is the deeper water, with light blue showing shallow waters. The green areas along the shoreline are irrigated crops, whereas the white areas are salt evaporation ponds. When we combine a multitude of geographic data, including these images and points, and enter that data into a computer, we can use a Geographic Information System, or GIS, to produce a mapping output. A GIS can simply be defined as a computer-based integrated database management system, which stores large volumes of spatial and attribute data that are captured, stored, retrieved, processed, and analyzed for providing answers to queries of a geographical nature. For example, the diagram on the left shows all the geographic layers that can be entered into a GIS to produce an accumulated final map. The final map would depend on what layers of data were entered and what geographic solution were sought. A GIS can answer questions like what exists at a particular location, identify where certain conditions exist, what has changed since, what spatial pattern exists, and what if modeling. In other words, a GIS can determine location, condition, trends, patterns, and model geographic data. A GIS can simplify a geographic solution out of a myriad of complicated data. In this course, we will be examining 12 world regions as denoted in the image on the slide. These regions are not by continent, but by shared cultural and geopolitical history that bind them together. They are North America, Latin America, the Caribbean, Sub-Saharan Africa, North Africa and Southwest Asia, Europe, the Russian domain, Central Asia, East Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and Australia and Oceania. Under each of these regions, we will look closely at 5 themes to describe those regions. 1. Physical geography and environmental issues. 2. Population and settlement patterns. 3. Cultural coherence and diversity. 4. Geopolitical framework. And 5. Economic and social development. The physical and environmental theme will be discussed in more detail in Chapter 2. Therefore, we will move on to the second theme, which is population and settlement. This map emphasizes the different population densities in the areas of the world. Take a look at East Asia and South Asia. Their densities are extremely high. Currently, there are over 7 billion people on Earth and estimated to increase to almost 10 billion by the year 2050. Most of that is projected to come from Sub-Saharan Africa, while Europe and Russia are projected to shrink. Population is a very complex topic, but to help focus the issue, let's look at several points. Number 1, there are different rates of population growth throughout the world and not evenly distributed. 2, the population growth rate has slowed down a bit in the last 50 years, but critics believe we are still growing towards passing the Earth's sustainable carrying capacity. 3, there are many population plans that different countries have enforced to help decrease the total Earth's population. 4, migration is also another population issue to where the world could become more lopsided. And 5, the greatest migration in human history is occurring now. This chart shows population statistics for several selected countries. Across the top, the statistics are total population, and if you look down the column, the 3 leaders are China, India, and United States. Can you understand why China has instituted a one-child policy? The second column is population density, which is the number of people per unit of land, and in this case, square kilometer. Look how dense the population is in Bangladesh. The third column is the rate of natural increase, commonly referred to as RNI, which is crude death rates minus crude birth rates divided by 1,000 and is stated as a percentage or rate. Any number over 1 means the population is growing. Migration is not considered in the statistic. The fourth column is total fertility rate, or TFR, and it is an artificial and synthetic number that measures the fertility of a statistically fictitious yet average group of women moving through their childbearing years. This rate reflects childbearing trends. The population replacement rate is 2.1, meaning it takes a minimum of 2.1 children to replace their parents. The 0.1 accounts for any infant mortality that may occur, including women who die before having children. The current TFR for the world is 2.5. The fifth column is percent urban. This number is the percentage of the population of that country living in an urban setting. Take a look at Japan. Can you see why Japan's cities are overcrowded? The next column is the percentage of the population below the age of 15, or in other words, the youthfulness of that population. This number will give you a good picture of the momentum of population growth in that country. Currently, the global average is 26%. However, in Africa, that figure is 41%, with several African countries reaching 50%. The lower fertility and growth numbers for China is indicative of the strict child planning policies they began establishing about 60 years ago. And the last column is the net migration rate. That is the number of people either entering or leaving a country on a long-term or permanent basis. A negative number indicates more people are moving out of the country than entering. Population pyramids are a graphic representation of the age and sex of any given population, usually by country, in 5-year increments. Their shape derives mainly from the birth rate and can be grouped into 3 categories: rapid growth, which generally shows up as a true pyramid shape; slow growth, which generally shows up as a cylinder shape; and negative growth, which generally shows up as an inverted pyramid, or as I call it, a tornado. Not only do they help us visualize population growth and compare growth amongst different countries, but they also display gender differences within a population. For example, a population pyramid would show the impact of gender selection preferences for males in places like China and India, and wartime deaths of males over females. They can also help us visualize demographic impacts of significant past events like baby booms. Both the United States and Germany experienced a baby boom about 50 to 60 years ago, as you can see the bulge in these pyramids around that time frame. The demographic transition model basically grew out of several studies of population trends in Europe. Broadly, this model relates to changes in the rate of natural increase to social change as a result of urbanization and industrialization. Industrialization refers to the fundamental changes in technology and systems of production that began in England in the late 18th century. This model also considers as a country becomes more industrialized, so does its social development, which includes its healthcare, food and water distribution and sanitation practices. Therefore, in stage 1, with high birth and death rates and low population growth, you have a more primitive, underdeveloped society. No country today remains in stage 1. As the country moves into stage 2, the birth rates are still high, but death rates begin to decline and your youth rate shoots up. The rate of natural increase at this stage is high. This stage is considered early industrialization, and some of the social development issues are improving, which help account for the decline in death rates. Stage 3 and 4 are considered late industrialization, where both birth and death rates drop. Natural increase is declining and beginning to level off, and social development is continuously improving. At stage 5 is post-industrialization, where the demographic transition is complete. In this stage, the society reflects a higher social development with birth, death, and growth rates. Example countries in stage 5 are the US, Canada, Germany, and China. Migration is also accounts for a shift in population structure and is statistically shown as a net migration rate. A positive number indicates that more people are moving into the country than out. With a negative number, the opposite is true. As a matter of fact, even though the U.S. population growth is below the replacement level, the overall population continues to grow due to migration from other countries. Another fact is that most migrants move into urban settings, therefore increasing the density of city populations. There are many reasons for migration. For example, economic opportunities, civil unrest, war, famine, standard of living, healthcare, and environmental degradation. We call these reasons either push or pull factors. Push factors are those that push people out of their homelands, usually involuntary or for safety reasons. In any case, they don't necessarily want to leave but have to. And pull factors are factors that tend to draw people, not under pressure, to another country. Please pause the video and answer the following. Describe push and pull factors in migration and list at least 3 examples of each. In your own words and using the text as a guide, be thorough and specific in your answer. In the United States, the population density is 33 people per square kilometer, whereas it is 388 in India. The relatively low density for the U.S. results from a vast area of dispersed housing, as illustrated in the bottom photo from Iowa, while India, in the top photo, has denser settlement in both cities and countryside. The third theme deals with cultural characteristics and diversity. Let's first define culture. Culture is behavior held in common by a group of people, empowering them with a way of life. Culture is not innate but learned. Culture also encompasses abstract and material dimensions like speech, religion, ideology, value systems, housing, food, and music. Culture can be fluid, not always staying the same. These changes occur usually when one culture collides with another and then sometimes blending together to form a new culture. This is called hybridization. Colonialism and globalization are 2 events that have made some cultures hybrid. Culture also experiences imperialism. That is when one culture is promoted at the expense of another. This happened to a large extent, again during the colonial period in Africa and India. The photo depicts cultural imperialism in colonial architecture, in which German architects in Namibia, Africa, provides clues to the former colonial relationship between that country and Germany. On the other hand, this action sometimes evokes cultural nationalism. That's the process of protecting and defending a cultural system against diluting or offensive cultural expressions. Please pause the video and answer the following. Describe the pros and cons of cultural nationalism. Also, why would cultural nationalism be seen as a criticism of globalization? In your own words and using the text as a guide, be thorough and specific with your answer. There are thousands of languages in the world, and yet language is the single most trait that binds a culture together because it is the primary means by which communication can occur. And communication is important for cohesion. It's the glue that holds a culture together. When 2 cultures cannot communicate directly with their own languages, they often agree on a third language to serve as a common tongue. This is called a lingua franca. Swahili was a lingua franca, now widely spoken in Africa, with Eastern Africans and French. Today, English is increasingly the common language of international communications, science, and air transportation. In this map, you can see the language families and where they are located. Another important aspect of language are dialects. Dialects are closely associated with specific regions and places. Can you see that Indo-European languages, which includes English, are the largest group of language families? Sino-Tibetan is the second largest, which includes languages spoken in China, the world's most populous country. Another important characteristic of any culture is religion. There are several religions in the world and are generally placed into one of the following categories. The first one is universalizing religions, which includes Christianity, Islam, and Buddhism. These religions generally appeal to all people regardless of location or culture and usually seek new converts throughout the world. On the other hand, there are ethnic religions, which are closely related to a certain ethnic group. For example, Shintoism in Japan, Hinduism in India, and Judaism in Israel. Their followers are usually born into these religions and do not spread. and another is animism, a religion that is closely tied to the physical realm or environmental elements, mainly followed by indigenous peoples or tribes. Lastly, some people fall into secularism. These followers usually tout themselves as non-religious or even atheist. Gender and gender roles also play an important part in cultures. Gender is a social cultural construct linked to the values and traditions of specific cultural groups. While gender roles are usually defined within each culture to distinguish appropriate behaviors between men and women beginning from childhood, gender roles can also differ in different cultures. Women's gender roles, much more than men's, are reinforced by appropriate dress and traditional clothing, as shown here for these Muslim women in Zanzibar, Tanzania. The fourth theme that the region chapters will discuss is geopolitical framework. The term geopolitical is used to describe the link between geography and politics. Geopolitics focuses on the interactivity between political power and territory at all scales, from local to global. All of the world's territories are broken into either states, nations, and/or nation-states. States refer to a political entity with territorial boundaries recognized by other countries. Nations are a large group, larger than a community or tribe, who share numerous social cultural elements without a state. A good example of a nation is the Kurds in northern Iraq, Iran, Syria, and eastern Turkey. A nation-state is a homogeneous cultural group occupying its own political territory, like France, Germany, and Japan. Globalization has weakened the concept of nation-state since cultures are blending together regardless of territorial boundaries. Autonomy has been a watchword of geopolitics as of late, in that some ethnic groups such as the Basque of southwestern France, seen in the photo, are demanding recognition, autonomy, and often independence from larger political units. These movements are also called separatism. Colonialism is the formal establishment of rule over a foreign population. A colony has no independent standing in the world community, but instead is seen only as an appendage of the colonial power. Colonialism was generally associated with European power over much of the world. As a matter of fact, there are only about 23 countries that England has not invaded over the years. This map shows the colonial imprint of mostly European powers prior to World War I. As you can see, most of Africa was under colonial rule until that time. Global terrorism is on the rise. Much of the terrorist acts prior to the events of 9/11 focused on specific local targets, such as the IRA bombings in Great Britain and Basque terrorism in Spain. Some of these acts of terrorism can be identified as reactions to globalization. Experts believe that the goal of the Al-Qaeda terrorists was not to disrupt world commerce and politics, but to make a statement about the strength of their own convictions and power. It is a known fact that some Muslims dislike Western values, and these Western values are spreading through globalization. To combat terrorism, military respond with counterterrorism and counterinsurgency, which combines military warfare with social and political service activities designed to win over the local population and deprive insurgents of a political base. Finally, the fifth theme of the regional chapters center on economic and social development of that region. Unfortunately, poverty is still widespread in many countries. The World Bank uses $2 a day as their definition of extreme poverty, and recent estimates place about half the world's population in that category. These people shown in the photo survive by picking through the rubbish dumps surrounding Manila, Philippines. Scholars have devised the core peripheral model due to the wealth of a few countries in the Northern Hemisphere. According to this model, the US, Canada, Western Europe, and Japan constituted the global economic core, all located in the Northern Hemisphere, whereas most of the areas in the Southern Hemisphere make up a less developed periphery. In addition, many critics claim that the developed countries achieve their wealth primarily by exploiting the poorer countries of the Southern Hemisphere, mainly through colonialism from the past, the neo-colonialism in the present. and the neo-colonialism in the present. Today, when we describe the development of a country, scholars use the terms more developed country, MDC, or less developed country, LDC. In the map, based on GNI per capita, PPP adjusted, you can see the global patterns of MDCs and LDCs. Africa and the different parts of Asia stand out as the region with the greatest number of developing countries. Similar to the population statistic chart we saw earlier, and using the same countries, these are the development indicators that experts use to explain the social and economic outlook of a country. The first indicator listed is GNI per capita, PPP, as we saw in the previous map. PPP stands for Purchase Powering Parity. When the GNI is adjusted for PPP, it means that the local currency's strength or weakness was adjusted to match that of the US dollar. Since currency valuations are different in each country, this adjustment allows us to compare those currencies as an apple-to-apple approach to the US dollar. And per capita means per person. GDP, or gross domestic product, is based on the total value of all final goods and services produced within the borders of that country. GDP is a basic measurement widely used to gauge the wealth of a country. Take a look at China's growth within the last 11 years compared to that of the United States. A higher growth rate is expected in LDCs. Growth rate begins to slow down when a country reaches the MDC status. The next statistic is Human Development Index, which is used to measure social development. This is a compilation of factors to include life expectancy, literacy, educational attainment, gender equity, and income. The next column measures poverty, whereas deep or extreme poverty is living on $1.25 per day. The fifth column is life expectancy. Life expectancy is the average length of a life expected at birth of a typical male and female in a specific country. This is often used as a social development indicator, as well as health services, nutrition, and sanitation all impact a person's lifespan. Can you see the countries at the lower end of the range? Nothing unexpected, right? What is surprising is that Japan is greater than the United States. Under age 5 mortality is also another indicator of social development. This has been used because experts believe that children under the age of 5 suffer the most when healthcare, availability of food, and public sanitation is not adequate. You can see how conditions have improved across the board from 1990 to 2011. All the countries listed have improved their conditions. The next column is adult literacy. Can you see the disparity between men and women in a lot of those countries? And the last indicator is gender inequality. Gender equity measures the relative position of a woman to men in terms of employment, empowerment, and reproductive health. The range for a gender equity is 0 to 1. 0 equals the greatest gender equality, and 1 equals the greatest gender inequality. Please pause the video and study the chart and answer the following. Explain why you might think that Japan's life expectancy is lower than that of the U.S. Also, for a woman, which country would they most likely want to leave? In your own words and using the text as a guide, be thorough and specific in your answer. This map shows the most recent rankings that make up parts of the Human Development Index. There are no questions to answer, but please pause the video and take a moment to review the map. Even though cost of living varies greatly around the world, experts can agree that the definition of poverty is living on less than $2 per day, and extreme poverty is living on less than $1.25 per day. There are many people around the world that live in poverty. Again, under age 5 mortality rate is a good indicator of countries, healthcare, sanitation, and food availability. In the photo, a child is being seen by a doctor in Nguyen province of Vietnam. Gender inequalities in education lead to higher rates of illiteracy for women. However, when there is gender equity in education, female literacy has several positive outcomes in a society. For example, educated women have a higher participation rate in family planning, which usually results in lower birth rates. These women shown in the photo are in a literacy class for women and girls in a refugee camp outside of Mogadishu, Somalia.